Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thanks for being here for our Wednesday evening midweek encouragement. I have just a brief devotional that I want to share with you tonight. I was thinking about what to talk about today, and I realized that Sunday, being Mother's Day, I'm probably going to take a little bit more of a path that direction. And so I want to make sure that you see what's coming next in the text of First Kings in our Elijah story, because what really comes next is so radical in the text. I mean, it's so shocking to what you would expect. I couldn't wait to bring this any longer. And there's a good chance that the following week on Sunday I will address this text, but I just want to give you something now because there's a good chance that you've experienced something like this in your life. I'm looking at 1 Kings 19. So if you recall, Elijah has basically gone to the top of the mountain. He has lived through one of the most incredible stretches of any Bible character ever. He has been sustained by God miraculously for 3 years in miraculous ways. He challenged all the prophets of Baal. He went to the mountaintop of Carmel, called down fire from God, and then slaughtered the prophets of Baal, and then went back up to the mountain and then watched the rain immediately fall. I mean, it is a triumphant, powerful moment. I mean, he's got to be feeling so strong in faith at this time. And so that's why what happens in 1 Kings 19 is so shocking. And it's almost like, I mean, no one would ever make up this story this way. It has to be true because nobody would write in what occurs next in the text. So if you will, look with me. I'm going to be reading from 1 Kings 19:1. This is truly after the rain has fallen. It says, Ahab told Jezebel all that Elijah had done, little tattletale, how he had killed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, So may the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. Then he was afraid, and he arose and ran for his life, and came to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness, and came and sat down under a broom tree, and asked that he might die, saying, It is enough now, O Lord, take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Would anybody have seen this coming in Elijah's story? So he has just prayed and seen a rainstorm fall on Israel, and message gets to Jezebel, the queen, who apparently has more anger towards what has happened than Ahab. And so Jezebel sends a messenger to Elijah saying, I'll just paraphrase, I'm putting a hit out on your life, and you've got a day to make it, and then you're done, pal. You're not going to walk out of this place alive. And so one would think Elijah would say, guess what, Jezebel? I don't answer to you, and if you step within 10 feet of me, I'll call down fire again on your face. I mean, at this point, Elijah has to feel like he can do anything, but that's not at all what happens. In fact, the opposite happens. He fears for his life. He goes south. The text says Beersheba, so that's like the lowest point, southernmost point, and he's heading down south. And he ditches his assistant, the servant that was looking out for the rain cloud with him. He says, hey, I'm not going to need you anymore. I'm pretty much done with ministry here. And then he comes to terms with the fact that he is a failure. He says, it is enough, Lord. Take away my life. I'm no better than my fathers. I didn't do anything here. Now, think about what all Elijah has accomplished in what we've studied so far in our Elijah series. Do you hear how crazy that sounds, that he would think that nothing happened? Now, how does a person get to that point? How does a person who has seen so much success and victory and experienced so much power of God, how do they get to a point where they basically throw their hands up and say, you know what? I really haven't accomplished anything. I'm a nobody. I've done nothing. I mean nothing. And it's really better for me to just throw in the towel and call it a day because nothing matters anymore. I'm done. How do you get to that point? It seems to me like the answer really here is unmet expectation and disappointment. As I look at what Elijah is essentially saying and why he responded the way he did, it seems that he thought when Mount Carmel ended and the rain fell, he truly expected a mass revival to occur in Israel, that they would, all the things he started would just sweep across the nation. Everybody would put away their idols. They would probably march into the palace and run Jezebel out of there. They would return to true worship of Yahweh. Maybe even the two nations, Israel and Judah, would unite again. And this was all he expected to happen. And what actually happened was the reform he saw on the mountain wouldn't go much further than the mountain. Jezebel was still there. Jezebel did not change her opinion. They slaughtered all those prophets, but it didn't. Jezebel didn't care. She still was as dedicated to Baal as she was 3 years ago. And so Elijah, all of a sudden, doubt creeps into his heart. Maybe none of this really meant anything. Maybe I failed. Maybe I. And so you can kind of see the rest of this story. I don't have time to tell it all. I'm going to preach on it in a week or two. But basically, the Lord comes to Elijah in the wilderness, just like it's sort of a combination moment here of Jonah sitting under the tree outside of town watching Nineveh, and Moses watching God pass by on the rock on Mount Horeb. It's almost like they're combining these two themes to show you what Elijah's going through. But God essentially ministers to Elijah and restores him and raises him up. And then at the end of the story, gives him help. He raises up another prophet named Elisha, who would even do greater things than Elijah would do. But I think the point of this story is to say, we have to be careful with our expectations and our disappointment. Because if we put our faith in the results that we're going to see in this life, it's going to be really easy to be disappointed when they don't happen. If you have a certain view of what you think is, for example, if what's going to happen in our church, and it doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen as fast as you want it to happen, it's going to be easy to turn on everything and everybody and maybe even God. And I would say, don't do that. If you have a picture of what your life is going to look like, I'm going to earn this much money, I'm going to get this job, I'm going to go to this school, I'm going to marry this person, you fill in the blank. And one little thing doesn't work the way that you expect it's going to work, all of a sudden you're crushed and nothing means anything anymore. But basically this story tells us by the end that God comes to him and says, look, Elijah, there are 7,000 people that are not going to bow their knee to Baal in this nation, and I have preserved them, and I will raise them up. And you're not alone. Just because it didn't happen the way you thought it was going to happen didn't mean that what you did had no value there. So Elijah thought maybe he was going to cause a massive revival that swept across the nation. But how do we know God didn't just have that Mount Carmel plan for him? How do we know that God didn't raise Elijah up for the purpose of removing those 450 prophets of Baal and doing what he did? And the same with your life. We're kind of being told by our society and that unless we make a difference in this world that has these implications that are global, or unless we affect all of our nation or society, that we're somehow a failure and we're insignificant. But Elijah made a massive impact in his life. I would say this, even if Mount Carmel didn't happen, he made an impact in that widow's life, didn't he? He made an impact in the son of the widow who lived. So just because maybe we're not a thought leader, or because we're not a politician or someone who has an incredible amount of influence, a celebrity, it doesn't mean that our lives are insignificant and that nothing we do matters. Man, God used Elijah powerfully, and he was despairing for the wrong reasons. I've had times in my life even in our church plant in Colorado, where I thought it was going to look a certain way. I thought God was going to do a certain thing with our church plant, and it ended up looking very different. And if I would have attached my worth to that, then I would have thought, it doesn't look like what I thought, therefore failure. But, I can see the path that God was taking me down, and he taught me so much through that path. And the same in your life. Just because your expectations aren't met doesn't mean that God isn't doing awesome things in your life. Doesn't mean that he isn't using you in small, powerful ways that maybe don't affect all of the universe, but they affect where you are. And he's a big God. He's got all sorts of people all over the place. So trust God. Don't despair. Don't buy the lie that nothing you do matters. And believe that God is using you for his good. And don't fall into the trap that Elijah fell into, that, well, because it didn't look like what I thought it was going to look like, that it failed. Because God was very quick to remind Elijah, you did not fail. You did everything I asked you to do. And that is success. Success is when we faithfully do what God tells us to do.